Okay, hey guys and gals, we are starting a brand new unit which is called macroeconomics. And we've already done fundamentals, we built our foundation, then we've added micro, which is looking through that microscope at one market and how they make the decisions in that market regarding supply and demand. Now we're adding to our little stack and we're looking at macro, M-A-C-R-O, which is taking market, the market of cars and the market of gas and the market of food and the market of tourism, and we're looking at how all of those interact together and how they're attached to each other. So we're going to be looking at markets within the United States primarily in this particular unit. The first thing we need to talk about is something called GDP. GDP is gross domestic product. Now when you hear the word gross, you think, ew, something disgusting. No. For this gross, we're meaning mass. We're meaning a large amount of something. Domestic, as we've talked about before, means within the home. Well, within this home, we're talking about within the boundaries of a nation, specifically for us, the United States. And product, of course, is the goods and services that are produced. So let's look at the definition of GDP. The market value, that means the dollar value, of all final goods and services produced in a country in a calendar year. Well, let's look at some specific things in this definition. Final. That means the end product. Not all the pieces that went into making the end product, but just the end product. Goods and services produced in a country. That means produced here in the United States. Not what was produced in Japan and we imported in. Not what came from China and we imported in. It had to be produced here in the United States in a calendar year. So you're talking about January through December. Okay, so we're looking at the market value, there's equilibrium, of all final end products, that's product market, not the business market, not the resource market, factor market, but final goods and services in the product market produced in a country, the United States is what we're looking at, in a calendar year, January through December. Okay? So, like we've got a used car dealership in Baxley. Does that count? No, they're used. They have already been bought before and they already counted one time into our GDP. What if I leave school today and I go to the local Goodwill and man, I've hit pay dirt, they've got a brand new group of books somebody's just donated and I am buying those books to take home and read. Is that going to help our GDP? No, because those are used books. Those are books somebody already bought. It was already produced in a calendar year and somebody already bought those. Those aren't going to count into GDP. All right, what about transfer payments? Transfer payments, if you'll remember, are where I take from one person and give to another person. So let's take welfare. If I take taxes out of my check and then they go into the welfare program to give to somebody else, that's transferring payments. Is that going to count into our GDP? Is that a final product made this year? No, that's not going to work. All right, what about investments? What if I take money and I go and invest in the stock market? Is that a final good or service? No. So if I go and I invest in a fast food franchise, I buy some of their stock, then actually what counts for them is the burgers and the fries and the other sandwiches and the drinks and everything else they sell, not my stock investment that I made in their company. So when I look at all of these things, GDP is the sale of it's the value of the final goods and services produced in a nation in a calendar year. All right? Economic growth, an increase in our GDP tells us how well we're doing as a nation. This is how I think of GDP and it helps me remember. When we find somebody on the cops and robbers shows on TV and they find somebody knocked out, first thing they go to check is their pulse. And they pick up that wrist or they put their fingers at their neck and they check to see if they have a pulse. Oh yeah, they're still breathing, they're still living. Think about GDP, gross domestic product, as our pulse. And the stronger our GDP is, the stronger our economy is, the better our health as a nation is. When our GDP is doing well, our economy is doing well, our nation is doing well. When our GDP is falling, our economy is falling, and it makes our nation look weak compared to other nations. Okay? So let's talk about how do I figure out GDP then? So let's go to this. Here's the formula for GDP. Don't get nervous seeing all these letters and plus signs and minus signs. I know it seems a little like math and it can make some of you nervous. It made me nervous the first time I saw it, but it's not difficult. GDP is equal to these four individual parts. All right? It is consumer spending. Consumer spending, that's when you and I go out and buy things. We like to go shopping. And if you notice, that attributes to almost 3/4 of our whole GDP. It's up to you and me just going and buying. Buying gas, buying a drink, buying a sandwich, buying clothes, buying a prom dress, renting a tuxedo, whatever the case may be, we're all contributing to the GDP and we're the biggest part of it. Part two is investments. Now when I see the word investments, that gets tricky because I think investing in stock market. That's not what they mean in the economics world in investments. They're talking about you as an entrepreneur investing in your business. Maybe you decide to expand your business and you actually spend $100,000 making your business larger. Maybe you decide to buy $20,000 worth of computers to upgrade all the computers in your business. That is business investment. So the way I remember it is when I see I think B-I. Business investments. But now on any forms or any calculations you see, it'll just be an I. That's 15% roughly, and this fluctuates because our economy is always in movement. Government spending. Government spending is when our government takes our tax dollars that we give to it and it turns around and spends that money, such as ordering a new fleet of naval ships. Well, that's got to be paid for, and that's used through government spending. Or such as buying a new stealth bomber, or whatever they may use in the Air Force at this point. That's government spending. Government spending could also be where we just put this new water park in Baxley. So that's an effort towards government spending. Anytime the government steps out and spends money, then that is it is an example of government spending through our tax dollars because that's how it works. That accounts for roughly 17%, and again, that can fluctuate. Now notice, this last one's the only one that's negative. Wow, negative would mean it's hurting us, right? 72%, 15%, 17%, -4. And notice this last one is X minus N. Actually, I like to think of it as X minus M, and I've seen it done both ways because it is exports, so I see the X, and imports, so that's why I like to think of an M. X minus M, or X minus N, which is exports minus imports. Now think about that. Exports are goods that are doing what? Yeah, they're going out of the country. Exports are goods that we produced here and we're shipping them out and selling them to other people. Imports are the things that we're bringing into our country. We bought it from China, we bought it from Japan, we bought it from Vietnam, we bought it from Pakistan, and we're bringing it to the United States. The fact that this is negative tells me that we're bringing in more than we're shipping out, which is a little frightening when you think about the size of the United States and the power of the United States and the productivity of the United States. We could be making so much and shipping out to others, but we're actually at a point now in our history where we are bringing in from other people more than we're shipping out to them. All right, so in looking at it, here's our parts of the GDP model that you're going to be looking at and considering. And we're going to watch a quick video on GDP. So, before we get into the next section, I want us to review real quickly. GDP, Gross Domestic Product. The United States gross domestic product is currently right around $13 trillion. That sounds huge, and it's hard to understand. Per capita GDP is when you take the total GDP, 13 trillion, divided by the number of people that live inside the United States of America, and it comes to over $30,000 a person. Comparatively, countries like Mexico are about 9,000, countries like Cuba are about 3,000. So that should tell you we're doing very well in the United States compared to some other nations. Talk to you later about GDP.